guys, how are we doing? We were joking. It's not even been a week since we've been back in the studio.
Yep. Glad to be back.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Great.
I'm telling you, I'm psyched about this episode. I hope everybody else is too. This is one of those things that more often than not, I find will absolutely pull people in. And all of a sudden, right before when we talked about the difference between meds and therapy, all of a sudden it's like, boom, now it makes sense.
Yep.
So I think we're going to have a lot of fun on this episode.
I'm looking forward to it. So, well, why don't we jump right in? So, last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever the release schedule is decided, we talked about every brain being unique. So let's harp on that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
What, Vince? Give me some either personal experience or going a little bit deeper on what we mean by saying every brain is unique, every person's unique.
Well, it's interesting because I think as a therapist, my self-reflection has been supported, through my education and just through the nature of the work that I do. You kind of have to practice what you preach. And so what stands out as most obvious is the way I've been able to recognize the uniqueness of my own brain. But let's be a little bit more general so that our listeners can relate, right? We all perceive things. Just that simple statement. I mean, the three of us are sitting here, and if we all looked at the books that were on the table, we would all perceive them just slightly differently. Even if I was sitting,
Do you see books?
where? I mean, arguably, even if I was, completely pressed up against Jeff, I would still see it differently than him. Right? But if I was that close, my perception would still be different. And so oftentimes people say, well, I don't know what's going on. Like my siblings don't feel this way too. And they grew up in the same contextual stressors, right? And people look to invalidate themselves based on their experience, based on not being like those that they think they should be like. They're straying away from that uniqueness, right? And that uniqueness, it has everything to do with the beautiful things that we bring to this world, and it has everything to do with the unique ways in which we struggle, right? But I think it all boils down to perception, a lot of it.
Yeah,
big time. And I mean, we have no problem recognizing that the human fingerprint is completely novel to each individual, right? Yeah. We get that. We know that
and
zebra.
It's easy to say because we can physically see it,
right?
You can roll your thumb around ink, press it on a paper, and mine's different than yours.
Yeah, zebra stripes. Every single zebra has its own unique stripes. Giraffes have their own unique spots. Now, bring this down to the human brain and follow me on this. The human brain is the most complex system in the known universe. There are more interconnections within the neurons of the brain than there are grains of sand on the seashore. There are more than there are stars in the universe. We don't know of anything more complex than the human brain. So why is it like a big surprise when we go, whoa, each one is unique? Absolutely. And the possibility for variation is astounding. So that's why I just kind of go, look, I've said before, God made each person with God's image upon them. Every single person is unique. Yep. It's sweet. And that's right. We bring it back down. We can see that in the electrical currents of your brain.
Mm-hmm. And we around here, I'm going to shout out my boy, Joey, Bobby Joe. He's awesome. He came up with this one for us, right? He said to us, well, guys, it sounds like you speak brain.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was a running joke in the office here. You said the first person, you'd give some amount of money to the first person who could elevator pitch what we do in a way, like in 30 seconds or less.
Yeah.
Just elevator pitch it. If you were climbing 3 floors, how do you describe neurofeedback in that time? And the truth is, it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really difficult to do.
That's what I said. I said, I spent 10 years trying to figure this out. And I said, I'll give $1,000 to anybody who can actually give me an elevator pitch, i.e. explain what I do for a living within 20 to 30 seconds. And, there you go. Thanks. Joey, he comes up with it in a couple of weeks after a list. Now it helps that this guy actually was a big marketing branding dude for he did what Apple and a major golf car. Yeah. So okay. But yeah, that was pretty funny. He just kind of, sounds like you guys just speak brain.
Yeah. For reference, Joey's a friend of ours. His son Russell, who maybe at this point you've seen some of his edits on our. He's done some videoing for us at some points. I went to school with him at Liberty University.
Shout out.
Shout out Liberty. But yeah, so we speak brain, right? Where does that come from? Where do we get that from?
Yeah.
Make sense of this to someone who hears that and is like, what does that mean?
Yeah. The language of the brain is electricity. Bottom line is, every thought you have, every sense perception you have, right? Everything you see, hear, touch, taste gets translated into an electrical current. Everything, right? Everything about how you focus, how you pay attention, every feeling that you experience, every reaction that you have, every single bit of it is mediated by an electrical current. And so the language of the brain, right? How the brain speaks to itself, how the brain processes information is all electricity. And that becomes super relevant, right? This is where I kind of jump off with folks when I'm trying to get them on the page for where does neurofeedback and neuroanalysis fit into the picture of mental health. And I go, well, if everything about your perception of the world and everything about your senses, all of this stuff about how you process, focus, manage your emotions, if that's all an electrical current, would it not surprise you to know that just about every symptom that's associated with a mental health disorder can actually be seen in the electrical currents of your brain?
It's a pretty, that would be crazy if that was true.
It would be crazy if it was true. So it's crazy.
Hey, touche. So, I mean, hey, perfect segue. I wanted to ask so now that we know how the brain functions, right? Through electricity, that's how it mediates itself. What do some of those dysregulated features look like, right? So like, I mean, we don't have to go into the nitty gritty and, maybe I can put up some pictures or something, but right. So when you're looking at an EEG, or one of our shout out Lynn and Lindsay, they're awesome, super smart.
They're neuroanalysts.
They're some of our neuroanalysts here at the office. They look at an EEG and they read the brain for a living. That's what they do. They read what the brain's saying. What are we like looking for in that electricity, right? Is it like, I'm dumb so the waves move slow, or is there something more to it?
There's a lot to this. And, one of these points, we're probably going to pull the neuroanalysts on and, get a little bit of their take on this kind of stuff. Essentially, I like to use the term biomarkers. Biomarkers basically refer to different characteristics or features in an EEG. And I should say, for those of you that are not familiar with that terminology, an EEG stands for electroencephalogram. It's a very simple, been around for over 100 years method for essentially just listening to or acquiring electrical frequencies from the brain, completely non-invasive. Like I said, nothing hurts. And so very simply, we can, gather information about the electrical frequencies. And then when you analyze it, you begin to see certain common themes that correlate between, okay, we get this kind of a dysregulated pattern here. We have a rigid/stuck feature here. And those things will relate to the symptoms of a mental health diagnosis, right? So, we were kind of joking about it before. You were saying, now that we've done an EEG on you and now that you become aware of some of your biomarkers, your features, you actually know when they happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the EEG in terms of highlighting one's already lived experiences in a way where they can look at it differently, right? Maybe take a different sort of ownership. So, I'll disclose, I've always, been labeled as someone who's had an explosive temper, anger issues, right? A lot of times it was hard for me to even understand why I was feeling the way I was. And I carry that my entire life. And thank God I've learned to regulate in those moments. But, come to work at the Neurivation Center, get a QEEG done, and come to find out I have F1 and F2 beta spindles. And so I feel these immense, multifaceted periods of overwhelm that lead to an instantaneous meltdown and then a very shameful and guilt-filled moment after. And it's a pattern that when I see it and it's associated with, a certain feature in the brain, I say, wow, maybe those weren't choices that I made to be so angry. Maybe I don't have to feel so bad about how those things turned out. So even in that information, the healing begins, you know?
Yeah. Cool story. Can I tell a story?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say really quick.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. For the listeners at home, I just want to point out there's no such thing as a quote unquote normal brain.
Mhm.
Correct.
Of course, it's Jeff who comes back from our neuroanalyst and she says, Jeff, you have the most like if I was to put a label on what a normal brain looks like, of course you have it.
No, my wife would totally disagree.
Yeah.
Trust me on that.
But like, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, the scenario you were raised in, there are going to be certain things that we can see. Like, there's no baseline of like, okay, this is normal, and anything that's not looking exactly like this is a problem, right?
Yeah.
They're like that's why we, hammer on we're so unique, right? Everybody is unique. Everybody is fingerprinted.
Yeah.
So when we talk about EEG stuff, like, listeners at home, I guarantee you, come in, get your EEG done. You will have so many things. I remember doing it getting my EEG for the first time, being like, oh my gosh, that's literally how my brain functions. Wait, what is happening? Like, it's kind of just like unreal. But I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's like, for me, I have a very a little bit of a traumatized brain. And there's
it wasn't me.
No, it wasn't him. I promise. For listeners at home who don't know us, Jeff is my dad. I don't think I've said that yet.
Proud dad.
But so point being, right? Like, no matter who you are, what environment you were brought up in, depending on genetics, that's all going to go into your EEG. And it's that hammers on the point. Like, every brain's unique.
Yeah.
But you had a story for us.
Yeah, I had a story. That's what I said. I'm going to have such a hard time staying on task today because I have so much fun with this topic. But along the lines of what you were saying about these things that we call F1, F2 beta spindles, these are pops of electrical activity. They're not dangerous. They're not, probably a quarter of the population has them in some form or another, doesn't even know about it. But when the pop goes off, it distracts, it disrupts, it does something, right? So if it pops in the part of your brain where you're controlling or containing emotion, well, the likelihood is you're likely to lose control of that emotion. I've had two different young men. We're talking like 12 and 13 years old, right? Both of whom came in because of significant problems at school with impulse control, outbursts. These were the kids, right? You all know them. You've met these kids that just seem to be the troublemakers. They're the ones that just do the stupidest things. They'll burst, they'll have outbursts. They'll like disrupt the class. They'll like hit a kid and all this kind of stuff. And these kids, they'll do it. They'll recover. They'll feel like absolute idiots, but everybody around them is telling them they're bad kid. You're just a bad person. There were two different times that I sat kids down with their parents there, like the exact scenario we're talking about here. And I showed them the evidence. Both of these boys, these two different scenarios, they both broke down and started crying. Literally started crying in my office, and the parents are like, what's wrong? And they're just going, you mean to tell me I'm not evil, I'm not bad, I don't want to be like this, I don't want to, and I can't help it. And I always tell folks, I'm like, okay, it's not an excuse to give into this stuff. I don't want you to, I want you to learn control. You can learn control, but the bottom line is, right, not everybody has that feature. 25%, 20% of the population has the mild form, 5% maybe has the more severe form. And if you get them in the right area, it's going to almost guarantee that you're going to have a hard time dealing with this kind of stuff. But these kids, when they, just like you said, it was validating simply for them to be able to realize it's not that I'm an evil person or there's some demonic force inside of me that forces me to do this stuff. These kids didn't want it.
It separates it from their personality, right? And that's where they can, yeah, exactly. And, to speak to that uniqueness too, you think about the unique experiences we have every single day, leaving here to head home, there's going to be experiences that are unique to each of us. And it's those experiences that can imprint certain features in the brain, right? So, traumatic experiences can happen and features can show up there afterwards. So you start to think about that uniqueness as almost like a compilation of the things we've been through in an electrical story. And our brain holds that story. Learning to listen is the tricky part, right? Especially if you don't know what's out there to help you learn that dialect.
Yeah. And Josh, you had mentioned before too, how, that there's a range of features, that there's no such thing as normal. What I tell folks regularly is, in the same way that we all have different body types and body styles, and that they can be genetically consistent with who we are, right? They're not necessarily a bad thing, but they will tell us something about our ability to perform, right? I love this. I love being able to play with, kind of the way God made me. I mean, because when it comes to like what we would call standard deviations, being off the charts, kind of abnormal with a body type, I mean, for crying out loud, I'm 5'3". I'm built like a gorilla, and I'm a white guy. So you pull all those three things together, and standard deviations wise, I'm just not anywhere close to the norm. But for me, yeah, it's genetically normal. It's not pathological. It's just how I am, which, right, if you're a fitness trainer, you're going to look at a guy like me and go, we're going to need to work on some things here that, we got to really work on your flexibility because, man, you're tight as can be. And we're not going to maybe paint you out as being an NBA player. Maybe we'll work on you more. You're better for soccer or wrestling or right. And it's the same thing with a brain. Same thing, and by the time you realize that, like you said, and Vince was, you're totally on it. Individual experience matters, personal choices matter, but so also do the genetics of your brain.
And it's really interesting too. Like again, I'm gonna try to put up an image of this. There's actually two different ways that your brain likes to dysregulate. There's a hyper rigid feature, and there's a instability feature. Thank you. Yep. I was going to say less stable. But there's instability and rigidity.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about that. First of all, how'd you come to find that one out? And second of all, like, what do some of those look like?
Yeah. I actually got this illustration, this image from a research doctor at, he was in Boston and doing a lot of research on neuromodulation and how to change brain rhythms and all that kind of stuff. And he said, look, one of the best ways to present this is to say, look, the way that the human brain regulates is just like any kind of like living organism. It has to have this stable baseline that's very dynamic that adapts to the environment and goes back, adapts and goes back, right? And so all day long, that's what your brain does. Moment by moment, it should have a stable baseline. It shoots off, accomplishes a task, comes back to baseline. So when you think about it, well, then what are the two problems that you could have? Well, one of the problems is your brain destabilizes and doesn't control that. Right? Those beta spindles that we were talking about, this is, I like to call them popcorn, right? Pop, pop. The more severe ones are kind of like a firecracker. You get these pops of electrical activity. So it's pop, pop, right? Destabilize. And it'll interrupt patterns in your brain. It'll interrupt control. It depends on where and how, but that's one of the ways in which it can destabilize. There's a whole range of ways that you can see the brain destabilizing itself, a lot of which have to do with attentional networks, right? Distractibility type ADHD. There's two different forms of zoning out. Both of them are destabilizations. So you have a lot of these things that go on. And then you've got a brain that gets stuck, right? A lot of anxiety features are frankly stuck features, right? So instead of adapting and going back, right? Somebody said something to me the other day, and I can't believe what she said to me, and it made me so mad. And I just keep thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. I can't stop thinking about it. And so even when I go to sleep at night, I try to go to sleep, and I can't believe what that girl said to me. And if she says it to me, right? And you just get stuck. That is a rigid feature. Your brain is stuck processing cause and effect relationships, managing emotions, and it can interrupt that cycle. So when we start looking at a lot of these dysregulated features, it actually really helps to see it that way. We always try to do some fun, we do some fun ways of illustrating it and all that kind of stuff. But that's the gist of it.
Yeah, you think about perseveration and you think about, assuming that Yeah, let's think about, assuming that the path to a tiny glimpse of success is the only path, right? So like rigidity comes with that, right? Like it comes with feelings, like there is only one route to help. And so a lot of times there's a lot of untying of really, really tight knots when it comes to a rigid or locked brain. And we see it in so many different features too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's crazy too. This is what we said. I think we said it last episode. There are 10 plus different biomarkers associated that any one of them will present as an ADHD diagnosis.
Oh, generalized anxiety disorder.
Or
Sorry.
generalized anxiety disorder.
There's at least 15 biomarkers that are associated with ADHD.
That's why he's the professional.
There you go. And this is why, I always say this, the emperor's new clothes. Everybody knows that ADHD as a diagnosis is completely invalid and unreliable. Those are, research grade statements. It's just not sufficient to communicate what's really going on. But we take a look at, right, the EEG, and all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, here we go. We got the focus zone out that's going on over here, impulse control issues over here. We've got problems with coherence that are going on over here. And by the time you pull these biomarkers together, you don't have a diagnosis. You have a sense of where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm. So where my mind goes to on that is, right, when somebody, I feel like in our day and age, there are so many people that have ADHD. And I bet you it's probably because of technology. And, have you, I don't know if you've experienced this or seen this over the years, but I wonder about the significance of technology use and like scrolling. I know like scrolling puts you, is it a theta state that it puts you into where you just like kind of are lulled out of reality almost? I don't know. There's some interesting things with that I feel like technology is in.
I could see it go in a multitude of different ways depending on that individual's uniqueness, right? Sure. Now, depending on my doom scrolling, I might bring myself to a place of vicious, catastrophic thinking and rumination, or I may zone out entirely from my real world that I can touch and have an impact on and interact with, and it really is interesting to think about these features showing up and, trying to talk about biomarkers alongside diagnosis is one thing, but as someone who's come to, really love this side of mental health, talking about biomarkers and symptoms, right? Talking about biomarkers and the fact that a lot of symptoms are misinterpreted and mislabeled. I can't tell you how many people I've had come to me and say, I have ADHD and I have a serious issue with my attention and focus. And when you start to uncover the history and the significant lived experiences, you see a lifetime of trauma. Now, who isn't going to be paying attention to their surroundings if we've had acute traumatic moments? Who isn't going to be distracted by their brain's sought after path to safety? You know what I mean? And so when we start to, again, categorize broadly, we start to overlook a lot of important factors.
Yeah, I'd probably tell you that somewhere between 10 and 20% of all of the children or kids that are diagnosed with ADHD actually have hyperarousal or hypervigilance features that we would associate with trauma. And the way I express this to them is it's kind of like, okay, there's a polar bear that's right outside the door that's trying to break down the door and wants to come in and eat you. And your mom keeps saying, do your math. Mom, there's a polar bear. And that's what their brain is telling them. What I couldn't focus if I thought somebody was trying to break into my house. I wouldn't want to do math. So there's a lot of these variables that are at play. And, I even think that, even the changing dynamics of our culture, not even just, the nature of stimulation that we get from blue screens is something that really does kind of lull our brains into it's a kind of like a stimulated mode that doesn't take a whole lot of effort and that just automatically draws us in. But at the same point, we got to keep in mind that we live in a society where it's very unforgiving of anybody that can't stay focused. Incredibly unforgiving. And whereas if you were to take somebody that, lived in more of a tribal society, lived outside, the external world is a very calming environment, whereas we live in, think about it. We live in a world of 60 hertz ambient electrical noise every day. We have this over arousal environment that we all live in, and it's overstimulating us chronically. Whereas if you're outside, it's constantly calming and soothing. And if you're constantly distracted by, ooh, butterfly, that's not a big deal. Oh, wait, what was that sound? Huh, it was the bear that was coming after me. Those are actually advantageous. Whereas nowadays you're sitting in a classroom and, oh, butterfly, Johnny, pay attention. It's unforgiving. Yeah. So I think some of it's even related back to the culture and the demands that being in a technologically advanced, education and all this kind of stuff, organized administrative environment has a huge effect.
That's fascinating. All right, so one of the other fun things in planning this episode that I wanted to hit on was something that we say is the brain is endlessly creative when it comes to finding ways in which it can be anxious.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you guys had any fun, not fun, but I guess like funny interactions that the brain has had to create anxiety, like things, obviously, like don't name anybody. We want to protect our clients and everything. But just silly things where you looked at it and you were like, "Huh, I've never seen that one before. That's really impressive."
You got one?
I think you should rock with it because I'm going to come up. I'm going to reflect.
Okay, so I just had a young gentleman the other day. Right now, keep in mind that, as I said before, there are at least 10 different biomarkers that are proven to be directly related to the diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. So GAD is a dumber diagnosis than ADHD. If you had any one of them, you'll get the diagnosis of GAD. Okay, so there's racing thoughts type, there's multiple forms of being overwhelmed, there's probably 4 or 5 of them are related to hypervigilance and sensory processing disorders, right? So when you think about it, if we're trying to treat anxiety with a medication, which one are you treating? There's 10 different problems. So that's a huge guessing game just to begin with. And then if you're trying to do talk-based counseling, well, what if it's a sensory processing disorder? My brain's on sensory overload. You can't talk your way through, hey, so why is it that you want to wear, a hoodie all the time and, play music in your ears to ignore what's going on in the bus? Maybe we should do some coping skills. No, it's a sensory processing disorder. So anyway, so there's the 10 normal ones, but you're absolutely, like, every once in a while we'll get somebody that comes in, and the way that all of the biomarkers and the features and characteristics of their brain interact with each other, it's like, you're like, wow, that is so cunningly, mischievously, like, brilliant. That's so one of the guys that I just was talking to last week, he actually has a profoundly under-aroused brain. Yep. So a lot of the features that I'm seeing in there had more to do with ADHD and zoning out and poor executive function. And yet this guy was chronically expressing pretty significant anxiety. And what really is, I began to piece together the circumstances of this young man's life. This is a guy that had figured out how to kind of overcompensate by raising up his level of anxiety to override the executive function and focus deficits. So think in a sense, right? These are what we call, I love using big words right now. So every once in a while, right? We love impressing people with words. I mean, frankly, these are ones that I would stand in front of the mirror and practice for like a day or two before I use them. But one of them is auto-stabilization mechanism. What the heck is an auto-stabilization mechanism? Well, think about, the last time you were at a party and with your family, and there's the 2 or 3 year old nephew or niece, and it's past their bedtime. What are they doing? They want to fall asleep, but because of all the stimulation, they're going, ah! They're running all over the place. They're banging into walls. They're hitting people. They're having meltdowns. They're overstimulating to prevent themselves from falling asleep. That's an auto-stabilization mechanism. Their brain's telling them to fall asleep. So in order to stay awake, they got to overcompensate. That's what I was saying this guy was doing. So all of this guy's anxiety was kind of like that 2 or 3 year old going, it's like, I want to go to sleep. I want to zone out. No, I will not. I will not. I will not. I will stay awake. I will stay awake. And that's what he was doing, the poor guy. So
he was running on anxiety,
He was
right?
running on
So
anxiety.
it's almost like sometimes, when we veer, it takes a hard jerk of the wheel to try to get back to center, and sometimes we overshoot that, right? And thinking about the the creative ways that our brains can become anxious. I had the pleasure of doing talk-based therapy with someone who also engages in neurofeedback, and at the time, he was really struggling with anxiety surrounding things that he sought out and watched. All right, certain elements of the news and certain documentaries, and he would bring himself to a boiling point. And so, when we're here talking about choices in therapy and hitting dead ends, because obviously I'm not going home with the guy to help him avoid these things in his own living room, but each week we're coming back, and he's drawn back to it. And then when you look at his QEEG, what you end up seeing is that he has all sorts of issues with his resting, idling rhythm, his alpha. And so when calm doesn't feel calm for a person, when the moments that life slows down and we all catch a breath, when that becomes an opportunity to have to find something to think about, well, now it starts to make sense. And that's where those biomarkers can be massively impactful in considering the anxiety of a client you talk to weekly.
Yeah. And this is why dysregulated brain frequencies, this understanding this dynamic is a huge part of the paradigm shift. Right. So you think about that guy that I was just talking about. This guy is not actually, he doesn't actually have generalized anxiety disorder. The guy has ADHD. But when you put him on an anxiolytic or an antidepressant, in order to treat it for that, you will not really good. You're not going to get a result, likely. Why? Because the symptoms are presenting bizarrely. So this is why we go back and we say our job is not to categorize them into a diagnostic grouping. Our job is to figure out where are these symptoms coming from, and over and over again. And Vince, you can confirm this too. In our assessment process, I always tell folks, right, to do an assessment, you got to do 3 appointments, right? They're all 1 hour long. Okay, the first one is the goopy one, right? That's where you sit in a chair with a dumb looking cap on your hair. We put 20 squirts of goop in your head, and not in your head, but in your hair. It washes out easily. We always warn people, no hot dates afterwards. Don't go hang out at the mall. Just take a shower. You're cool.
Who goes and hangs out at the mall anymore?
We're dating ourselves.
Okay.
I'm dating. All right. Anyway, don't jump on a podcast. I don't know. So then you got that one. The second one is going to be the boring one. I always warn people. I'm like, I set the standard low so that if it's any better than that, at least you won't hate me. But that's the one where we get all the information about you, right? It's important. We need to get that. The third one is the fantastic one. Right.
My favorite appointment.
Me too.
Ever.
Absolutely. That's the one where we go over the results. By then, one of our neuroanalysts, Lynn or Lindsay, has spent 2 or 3 hours, right, literally poring over the fingerprint of your EEG. And these are women that have real practiced eyes. I mean, they've done thousands of EEGs, super expert. And then they're typing this stuff up. Right. I love the fact that there'll be like typos. They're mortified when I say this, but I always brag about it. I'm like, if you find a typo, that's just evidence that this was like totally made for you by somebody that actually, cares. Okay. So they type out all these different biomarkers. We do the reviews like every week. Our staff gets together. We talk through every client, make sure that we know what's going on. And then one of us gets the privilege of bringing out the results.
Truly is a privilege. It feels that way.
Yeah. Because, right, you lay it out there. I'm telling you, every person, like I can count on one hand. I've probably done 2,500, 3,000 of these in my career. I can count on one hand the number of times somebody said, no, that wasn't it. I mean, like, and those people, well, yeah, okay, I won't even get into it. But I'm like, all of the rest of the folks are like, oh my gosh, I'm so validated. This makes so much sense. I've got to get one for my husband. This is the greatest. Everybody should do this. Oh my gosh, and it's eye-opening. It's validating. People all of a sudden feel like even this in and of itself gives them hope. Because when you conceptualize it accurately, now, right, you've got the opportunity to create a treatment plan to treat it correctly.
Directly.
Yep.
And correctly.
Yeah, directly and correctly.
Correctly.
But I want to ask the listeners at home, as well as you two, is this the only brain you've ever had? Right? The answer is, for the vast, vast, vast majority of people, yes. you've only ever had one brain. I have no idea what Vince's perspective is, what Jeff's perspective is, how, right, like I have alpha deficits where you might have alpha excesses, you know, and all of these things present differently, right? Like, and that's a beautiful thing, but
I'm so proud of my son right now. That's one of my favorite jokes.
It's great.
Excellent.
But where one of the funny experiences I had was I was with a friend. They had gotten their QEEG done, right? And we're talking about their results. And afterwards, they come to me and they say, Josh, you know, it's really cool that, you know, as I come, you know, to realize all these different things that are going on in my brain, it feels like I've got like mice in my walls, or I've got like fruit flies. And I've just never really noticed them. Like nobody's ever pointed it out to me. It feels like you came in and pointed them out. But not only did you point them out, you also gave me a direct solution on how to, you know, get them out, how to fix them.
Yes.
Right. And that's the beauty of neuroanalysis paired with neurofeedback.
Feedback.
Like, you know, and we kind of, we're on the hunt right now to find any others. We're not sure that there are any other psychological tests that produce a directly correlated
Action
plan from it. Exactly. A directly correlated treatment plan.
Yep.
Because when we see this biomarker saying, you know, your, you know, alpha rhythm is too high, what neurofeedback does is bring it down when we're working with that exact EEG.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, there's a lot of other tests that you can use out there, but a lot of these tests are to inform you like what medication to prescribe if you're a psychiatrist, or, you know, hey, this is like the kind of therapy that you would do well with. But there's no like talk-based, you know, way of formulating that.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense to the people.
Well, for the first time in the history of mental health, we can actually functionally and non-invasively, safely,
non-invasive. That's a
completely non-invasive, easy as can be. I mean, frankly, if I didn't need to hold your hand and show you around and be personable, I could get research grade acquisition signals and run the recording within 20 minutes. Okay, that's easy and none of it hurts, right? But for the first time in the history of mental, except my humor, that's it. But we can functionally assess the organ primarily responsible for behavior and the symptoms associated with mental health issues, right? And this is one of the things that we've talked about. And I've kind of been trying to figure out, you know, is this true? Is it not? I kind of throw this as a little bit of a challenge out there to see if anybody can correct me on this. I do, in fact, believe that neuroanalysis is the only functional assessment in mental health that directly results in a treatment plan, exactly for what you said. If the problem is you got too much beta, and that's the stuck feature in your frontal region, and it's generating racing thoughts, we can get rid of the racing thoughts by programming the computer to decrease beta in the frontal regions. Cause and effect, you know, observation, correlation to a treatment plan. And I said, you know, as much as you can get a lot of great data from something like genetic testing, right? What's the point of genetic testing? Tells you whether or not if you take a med, your body is going to metabolize it. Okay, so I just realized that there's 5 meds that I can't take, but there's 75 other ones that I can.
Which one?
Doesn't tell you which one to take.
Go on your Easter egg hunt.
Bingo.
Just go on your way and find it, right?
And if you do a neuropsych,
yeah,
I mean, if you do a neuropsych evaluation, again, this is not to say that they're not valuable or have their usages, but the problem is they don't actually tell you what the solution is, because they're basically just conceptualizing the problem and then take a med or do therapy. But I just think this is the most exciting thing in the world, that we could actually see these issues and then treat them.
That's a challenge to you guys at home listening.
There you
Leave
go.
a comment. If you know of something,
be nice.
This is your chance.
Yeah.
We humbly ask for you to correct us if there is something else.
I'm very sensitive.
We haven't seen it.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? In 15 years, we have not seen a test that directly correlates with that treatment plan.
Yeah.
So honestly, really, really exciting stuff. So, yeah, I wanted to ask if you guys have any closing thoughts on what it means to be dysregulated. Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I think that, when it comes to how people view dysregulation in their own lives, like I would encourage the listeners to reflect and approach the word and, where dysregulation may have occurred in their lives in their past with curiosity over judgment. I think it begins there, right? If we're quick to judge something, we push it into the recesses of our mind and we try and, move away from associating with it. But out of sight, out of mind quickly gets out of hand. And so, I hope that today was a good beginning for, a process of reflection and a process of personal growth, saying, I don't have to be ashamed of any moments I was dysregulated. Now, whether that looked like overwhelming sadness or looked like rage or it looked like behaviors or it looked like isolation, let's ditch the shame and let's start to look at it with curiosity so that we could do something about it.
Right on.
Hey, that was a mic drop. These are expensive, so I wouldn't drop them.
We got strong stands.
That was awesome. Dang. Jeff, anything for
yeah, okay, I'll try. I got to do something, I love to tell folks when they come in, I go, when we do the review on the EEG and I go, here's the bad news. I found stuff, right? There's definitely some features and characteristics that correlate with problems. But the neutral news is if I do this to anybody, I'm going to find stuff. So trust me when I tell you, everybody's got this stuff. But the symptoms emerge when, because of our experiences, because the stressors in our life overwhelm our abilities to manage and cope with those underlying EEG features. Our resilience gets overwhelmed. Our support structures are overwhelmed and symptoms emerge. Okay, great. But the good news that I tell folks is once we find it, we now can figure out a whole lot about where it's coming from. We can now create protocols that have a really good chance of helping to resolve it, right? And so now there's an awful lot of hope for how we can move forward and how we can think of things. So that's one of the things that I want to leave folks with is, do not underestimate the significance of this kind of a tool. Like I said, it's a game changer, but I also really need to leave people with a warning, just kind of like look over at the camera on this. Please understand that if you give us a copy of your EEG, please do not commit a crime and leave a copy of your EEG at the crime because we will be able to pick you up out of a lineup. That's true.
Yeah.
Sorry, one of my bad jokes. I said I couldn't help. I had to tell that one.
Lindsay on that, haven't we?
Oh, both Lindsay and Lynn.
Lynn and Lindsay.
Yeah. So I did. I set up a test and I basically said, okay, here's an EEG. Okay. And it was a second EEG. It wasn't even the first one. And I took the second one. Okay. So we'd already done some neurofeedback and there were some shifts in it, like little bits of stuff. And I gave them that and I said, it's either A, B, C, D, or E. I gave them 5 options of who it could be. And I said, which one is it? Both of them got back to me in less than 5 minutes. And they were right. So your EEG is a fingerprint. Yeah. It's so cool. And that kind of gets back to other stuff. I'm sure we'll talk about it down the line, but keep in mind, our job is not to give you a normal brain. It's to give you a healthy brain. Your brain will always be your brain. We're always looking to bring out the bestest you brain.
I like that.
Bestest you brain. I don't think I've ever pulled those words together in my life, but well, there you have it.
Now you have. There's always a time. Well, hey, if you guys learned something new today or just enjoyed the show, would you leave us a like, comment, follow us on Facebook, follow us, share with your friends. We've got an Instagram page, all those good things. That would help us a ton. So thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Thank you guys for, again, your time. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm excited. We're halfway through our little pilot series.
Intro.
So the next episode is going to be diving into a little bit more about why the mental health care system and why mental health just as a whole feels so broken. And we're gonna tackle that topic a little bit.
I'm a little nervous about that one, but
yeah,
I don't want to get in trouble.
No, I know. We're gonna be good, but I'm excited. Well, thank you, family at home, family, friends. We will talk to you guys again soon.